They say the wind that passes through the Missouri Ozarks carries more than scent and sound. It carries memory. I've lived long enough to know that's true. Some nights when the fog slides down the hills like a burial shroud, I can still hear their names whispered in the trees. Eli and Samuel. The inbred twins who were sold, not stolen, not taken, sold by their own mother to two women the townsfolk once called the Mountain Witch Sisters. I was a boy when I first heard it, standing in the back of the old Union Chapel where the preacher's words sounded like thunder and guilt. My father said the story was just talk meant to scare the poor from selling their souls for bread, but even then I saw the look in his eyes when someone mentioned the year 1867. He knew something. Everyone did. And no one ever spoke. The Ozarks were cruel back then. Hunger rode through every hollow and faith was thin as the candlelight that shook in our windows. The hills hid things the law wouldn't touch. Sickness, madness, witchcraft. The Pike women, Clara and June, were whispered to cure cattle, to heal infants born wrong. Some said they could whisper to the dirt and make it bear fruit where nothing else would grow, but others said their roots ran deeper than any prayer could reach. It began with a mother's bargain. A widow named Ruth Kaler, her husband long buried, her farm eaten by drought, walked barefoot up Pike Ridge with two boys at her side. One was quiet, the other slower in the head, but both had eyes too bright for the world they were born into. She knocked on the sister's door and asked only for food. They took her inside. When she came out hours later, she carried a small pouch of coins and her sons were gone. I remember that part because my grandmother saw her that same night. Said the woman's hands were trembling, her eyes empty, like she'd traded not her children but her soul. By morning she was gone too, vanished into the pines. It's strange how time buries the things we can't stand to face. Folks still live near that ridge, still plant corn by the old markers, but if you listen close when the summer wind dies and the cicadas fall quiet, you can hear boys laughing, faint, breathless, from somewhere under the earth. Before I go further, tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Because what I'm about to tell you, it isn't a story. It's a confession. And if you wish to hear the rest of these forgotten sins,
stay with me.
Subscribe and listen until the end. Now, let me tell you what the mountain took and what it gave back in return. I used to think that nothing in this world could grow where Mercy had died. But the Pikes proved me wrong. Their house sat at the end of a logging trail, long forgotten even then. A sagging frame of oak and stone choked with vines and the smell of burnt sage. The townsfolk said they lived like ghosts, though no one dared test the rumor. Only once did someone climb that ridge, a hunter chasing a wounded deer, and he swore he saw pale figures moving behind warped glass, their faces lit red by candle flame. He never went back. The years after Ruth Kaler vanished were quiet. Too quiet. Cattle were born twisted and chickens laid eggs that bled. My grandfather said the ground up there turned black as if the soil itself had grown sick. But no one dared mention the boys. Maybe they hoped forgetting them would make the horror untrue. It wasn't until a flood in '72 that the story surfaced again. Literally. The river rose higher than any living man remembered, dragging up roots, bones, and the remains of what looked like a cellar door. Children playing by the banks found a rusted chain and a padlock still fastened to a rotted board. When the sheriff pried it open, the smell that poured out made grown men retch. There were carvings on the wood, circles and crude letters, and in the center, the initials E+S. Later, when I was old enough to ask questions, my father said the witches took the twins to train them. His voice trembled at that word. He said the sisters didn't worship Satan or any spirit we had a name for. They believed life itself was a thing to be molded, improved, and controlled. The boys, he whispered, were made to lie beneath the floorboards, listening to chants that twisted their dreams into obedience. Eli was strong, quiet. Samuel, the weaker one, had eyes that never stayed still. The sisters used to touch his forehead and call him the chosen one. Maybe they saw something in him that no human should. Maybe that's what broke him first. I remember finding a page once torn from a journal said to belong to June Pike. It read, "They are growing into the shape we require. Their blood remembers." The mother was right, the gift runs true. If that doesn't curdle your sleep, it should. Because no man nor woman nor God himself should ever talk of gifts born of children's blood. And you, wherever you are watching from, whatever hour your clock now whispers, look outside your window. Do you hear the wind? Here in these hills it still carries their cries. I once thought the Ozark wind only carried whispers of storms and pine, but after that journal page came to light, I knew it carried something else. A story no prayer could wash clean. My father tried to keep me from asking more. He said, "Son, some graves are best left unspoken." But the older I grew, the more I understood. Silence doesn't bury evil. It feeds it. It was an old midwife, Miss Ada Boone, who broke that silence at last. She was the one called to the ridge years before the fire to tend to a birth. She told my father what she saw, though he never wanted me to repeat it. Said she found the barn shuttered tight. No animals, just the smell of mildew and herbs burning slow in bowls. Eli and Samuel were there, chained at the ankle, dressed in white cloth that wasn't quite clean. And standing behind them were the Pike sisters, hands blood-stained, chanting in words Ada couldn't name. She said they didn't seem cruel, not in the way of beatings or whips. Their cruelty was quieter, like they thought themselves holy. They said the boys were blessed, Ada whispered, that their blood could mend what time had broken. I asked her once what that meant. She just stared at me, trembling, and said, "They made them touch hands and pray till their fingers bled." When Ada fled that barn, she said she could hear the boys crying, but the sound didn't follow her voice. It followed her shadow. That was the night the wind turned wrong, carrying the smell of iron and milk through the hollow. People say madness runs in families. Maybe Faith does too, because the twins didn't die that night. They lived, and if you can call what they became living. They were seen again in the spring of 1870, walking beside the creek, pale as wax, their eyes reflecting torchlight like the eyes of a fox. And the sisters behind them, proud, smiling, as though they'd remade creation itself. When I tell you this, I don't mean it as gossip. I mean it as warning. Because blood remembers, even when names are forgotten. And tell me, where are you listening from right now? What hour do your walls hold? Because here, where the hills never forget, the hour stays the same, somewhere between confession and curse. And if you wish to hear the rest, stay. Subscribe and listen until the end. The deeper I went into the records, the more the Boone Hollow began to feel alive, not just a place, but a wound that kept reopening. The county clerk's ledger for 1871 listed 2 deaths. Eli Boone, Samuel Boone, cause unknown, fever. But the midwife's journal, hidden beneath her floorboards, said something else. They were taken beneath. That phrase kept me awake at night. Beneath what? By late autumn, the Boone farmhouse had already begun to rot into itself. The roof sagged. The windows stared blank like empty sockets. Yet inside, everything remained untouched. Quilts folded, a Bible left open on the table, and a single chair positioned before a locked cellar door. The hinges were rusted black, but the key was still warm when I found it in the drawer. When I turned it, I expected dust and emptiness, but the air that came through was wet, like the breath of something waiting too long. My lantern light fell on a stairwell made of stone, leading down to earth carved by hand, and on those walls, handprints, small ones, some pressed in mud, others in something darker. At the bottom was a wooden table. No tools, no books, just 2 glass jars filled with what looked like creek water. Floating inside each was a lock of hair tied in twine, and behind them, carved into the wall, was a name I hadn't heard since my father's stories. Ada Boone. That's when I understood. The midwife hadn't just witnessed what the Pike sisters did. She'd joined them. Whatever they called beneath, she'd opened it herself, and when the fire came, it wasn't to hide the crime. It was to keep it from spreading. People say curses die with those who cast them, but that's not true. Some just sleep, waiting for someone foolish enough to whisper their names again. So if you're still here listening in the dark, remember, not every family secret should be unearthed. Some doors once opened, remember the sound of your hand forever. And before we continue, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? The name of your city, your hour. Write it below and keep your lantern close. The Boone Hollow story isn't finished yet. The cellar has no end. I know that now. I thought I'd reach the bottom when the steps ended, but the air kept sinking, pulling me further down. My lantern flickered like a dying breath, and the smell grew thick. Not death, not rot, but something older. Something that remembered being human once. The walls began to change. Stone gave way to clay, then clay to skin. It pulsed beneath my palm, slow as a heartbeat. I found the brothers there, or what was left of them. 2 figures seated side by side, their faces too smooth to be called faces anymore. Their arms were bound by roots that had grown through bone, weaving them together like the trunk of some ancient tree. One of them had something in his hand, a dried, withered ribbon tied in the shape of a cross. Their mouths were open, and from them the earth breathed. And there, kneeling before them, was the midwife, or her shape. Her back was arched wrong, her hair spilling down like wet moss. She was whispering words I couldn't understand, but I knew their meaning all the same. That no sin ever stays buried. It just changes form. The witch sisters hadn't taken the boys. Their mother had given them away, traded them for rain during the drought of '67. And every year since, the land had asked for something in return. The walls began to move then, slow and steady, as if the hollow itself was breathing in. I dropped the lantern and it shattered, spilling light across the mud. The faces around me multiplied, pale, twisted, hungry for remembrance. I stumbled up the stairs, but the door above was gone. There was only more earth, soft and warm, closing over me like hands. I don't remember leaving, but somehow I did. The old Boone farmhouse burned again that night, though no one saw me light a match. The sheriff said lightning struck it, same as before. I didn't argue. I've carried that smell ever since. Smoke and soil and hair. Now when the wind comes down from the Ozarks, it hums through the hollows like voices underwater. Some nights I think I hear the brothers singing. Other nights it's her, the mother, still begging the ground to forgive her. But I've learned something the hard way, and I'll tell you before I go quiet. The dead don't want peace. They just want to be remembered, right? If you've listened this far, keep their names where no one else can find them. And when your own house grows too still and the floorboards sigh beneath your feet, don't answer back, just let the silence have you.